Welcome to the Red Book podcast number 10 with myself, John Feigenbaum, and Jeff Garrett as hosts. Today we have a very special guest, Max Spiegel, the president of CCG. Max joined the Certified Collectibles Group in 2010, and he's served as the company's president since November of 2020. Max has helped grow CCG into one of the largest companies in the collectibles business. Today, CCG operates NGC, PMG, CGC, JSA, and ASG. I don't know how he does that alphabet soup, but anyway, they are all leading providers of third-party authentication and grading, and they're very important in each of their fields. Max's focus on emerging markets has ushered in CCG's successful expansion into new verticals, including stamps, trading cards, sports cards, video games, and much more. Under his watch, the company has also expanded internationally with offices in the UK, US, Germany, China, and coming soon, the UAE. So that's pretty exciting. We'll have to hear about that. The expert and impartial services that CCG has brought to these markets has made them safer, larger, and more diverse than ever before. That is an incredibly important part of third-party authentication. A lifelong numismatist, Max has written many articles for numismatic publications and has been recognized among coin world's most influential people. He is also a recipient of the ANA Young Numismatist of the Year Award, although not that recently, even though he looks young, and the ANA Glenn Smedley Memorial Award, and also the Florida Business Observer's 40 Under 40 recognition. Max, it's really great to have you here today, and we're going to dig in and ask you some good questions and learn more about not only NGC, which is primarily of interest to us numismatists, but more about the big picture over at CCG, which is an exciting company. Thank you for joining us. One other thing I want to point out is the three of us are all P&G members. So Max, welcome, to the club, and glad to have you on board. And I think we should just jump in and start hearing, your side of things.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Well, Max, I've known you for quite a while, and I know you're good friends with my son. And I'm glad you'll be able to come onto the show because we're trying to cover all the different major players in the business. And NGC and your Certified Collectibles Group is certainly one of the bigger ones. And NGC started grading in 1987, doing coins. And it's evolved into a big global brand doing, you guys have offices around the country, around the world. Can you tell a little bit of kind of what you understand about the evolution of from starting to kind of where you are today?
Yeah, well, look, we were started in 1987 as a coin grading service. At the time, counterfeit coins were a very pervasive problem. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys, lots of counterfeits. People didn't know what was genuine, what wasn't. There were disagreements about the condition of coins. So there needed to be an impartial authority. And so we were started in 1987. And what we found is that model really works for just about any collectible type. So from there, we expanded to comic books in about the year 2000, then banknotes in 2005. We did stamps, trading card games. Those are like Pokemon cards, sports cards. Now we're even doing video games and home video. So really any collectible, you want to know that it's genuine. You want to know what the condition of it is. So I think, even beyond what we're doing today, there are still many more categories for us to grow into.
Yeah, that's interesting. You brought up about the different categories, and I know before you had, I think one of the things I did a project with you guys is one of the last you did with the CA. I'm not sure what you called it, but it was like a separate unit that would certify artifacts and things. What's your structure now? How do you do different verticals of in how you I know also you've changed the conservation service. You're kind of different umbrellas. Can you tell us a little bit how that's structured now?
Well, I would say one thing we've realized is that having a different brand or a different abbreviation for every single category that we get into, it gets a little confusing. I mean, it gets hard to manage that many different brands. So, I think NGC is a super strong brand. Everybody in coins knows it. PMG and banknotes, everybody knows it. And so now we have CGC, which is like our pop culture and our card brand. And we just acquired a company called JSA, which is the world's premier autograph authentication service. And then the last one is ASG, which does stamp grading. So that's why NCS, the coin conservation company, we ended up collapsing that into NGC and just calling it NGC Conservation. We did the same thing with our comic conservation service. It's just too many letters. I think 5 is probably enough. And I think anything that we do in the future, it's going to have to fit one of those 5 brands.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I hear you. I hear you. We have a problem at Whitman is that we had at Gray Sheet before we merged, we had something called the CPG, the Collector's Price Guide, and then we merged with Whitman, and it wasn't even apparent to me until about a year later that what happened that the cherry picker guide is referred to as the CPG.
Okay.
And so now people are saying this is very confusing, and I sort of agree that it's confusing. And I don't really quite know what to do with it, but these multiple, let's say, alphabet soup of letters and things like that we all have to contend with is kind of a modern, maybe a modern business problem. But for the military folks, it's pretty normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. Once you get momentum with one of these brands, you can't change it. So we can't go back now. If I could go back to 1987, we probably would have figured out a way to do everything under one brand. But at the time, we just thought the collecting base is different. And that's actually one of the interesting things while we're on that subject. We're seeing more and more crossover between these different categories. Like our coin dealers are now doing banknotes. Everybody's asking us about cards and how can they get into the card market. The sports card guys are doing trading cards, trading card games. So there's just so much crossover in the world of collectibles today that having these different brands, to some extent it is a little bit confusing, but I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah, you guys really are. I think it's underestimated by the whole industry how enabling you guys are is making business possible. I can tell you that I wouldn't be in the ancient business probably, and it's a big part of my business if it wasn't for NGC certifying those coins with the authenticity, help opinion on that, and also the grading and more importantly, attribution. I have no idea how to do that, and I'm sure there's guys that are like getting into comic books or getting into other verticals you guys have that you've enabled them with the tools to be able to buy and sell those with some sense of accuracy. So we really help grow everyone's business by giving those tools to people.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, it really, to me, it just makes it more accessible. Like you can see exactly what it is because there's a label that describes the item. It tells you what the condition of it is. And so, nowadays with search engines, you just go into Google, you could type that in, you can find prices realized for those items. We have price guides on our website. So it has become so easy to collect anything. And I find myself, I started as a coin collector, but like I see some of the stuff that we're doing in these other categories and it's just now it's so easy to just buy something else because like you know exactly what it is. You don't have to worry, are you getting a counterfeit collectible? That I think it's brought so many new people into the hobby.
Yeah, that's fascinating. You're gonna be getting into certifying autographs.
Yeah, we're already doing that.
Wow, that's really interesting. That's because I have just my little bit of knowledge on it. I watch Pawn Stars, and I see the guy that comes in with his light and stuff. It'd be interesting to see once you guys get that really going. I'd like to see how that actually works. That's kind of just from a physical standpoint, that's pretty neat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you know
for
what?
sure.
On that same kind of topic, I saw a headline the other day where I think you certified an early Michael Jordan business card. I don't know which auction company was selling it. Maybe it was Sotheby's or something. And he's autographed the card, so the card is makes a headline because it's going to sell for a lot of money. And I thought, what a fascinating thing. Like in my desk drawer, I have maybe one of my original business cards when I was 11 years old or something. And I thought, if nothing else, I'm going to send this to you guys to get certified, just so I'll sign. What do I sign it now? Is that okay? But it's the only one in existence. If anybody cares, we'll put it up for bidding soon. But
I've got one
it's
of
a
this.
it's the coolest thing because, as Jeff said, and we support Max. It's like this is the vehicle for trading. So NGC was founded kind of before the internet, and then the internet comes along and says, hey, this is such a kind of a great way to sell things and market things and all that. Nobody realized that in the earliest days of the internet, and then coin collecting, which had become, let's say, mature a little bit. I remember worrying before the internet, this is the end, that's my father's generation is the last of it. And then the internet comes along and all of a sudden, without third-party grading, I don't think the internet would have been that helpful to coin collecting. And now, of course, other collecting. So I think that it's an extremely important and maybe the most underrated aspect of third party that we can trade things. I can call Jeff tomorrow and say, hey, I've got, an 1804 large cent and NGC VF30, what's your buy price on that? And he'll give me a buy price without seeing the coin. And I think that's a huge aspect of this business.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, between the certification, third-party certification, and the price guides you guys do, you really, like I said, use that word enabling, but it gives everyone the tools to be able to either be an educated collector or to be able to, have known for sure is genuine. And that's why, even like the books that I work with Whitman doing, the more you're basically giving tools to collectors to be able to do these things. And it's so it really is interesting to have both of you guys together, because you guys help you create the magic that makes it happen for a lot of collectors. So very, very important.
Well,
Um,
thank you.
so NGC, one thing I was talking about going in other directions. You talked about a little bit, but so you guys, like when I talk to you guys or have meet with any of you guys that work there, you guys have your pulse on really the market, not even just the market, but activity on so many different things. Like I know like what coins are hot or whatever collectible. So what is currently the hottest thing that's going on with in the collectible world? Like what should be on everyone's radar that probably have no idea there's so much activity.
Well, by far the hottest thing right now is Pokemon cards. And Pokemon cards have been big for, a number of years. Like we started grading them 5 years ago, actually almost exactly 5 years ago. And they've had their ups and downs through COVID. But right now, I mean, it is just crazy how big that market is. And next year it's celebrating its 30th anniversary. So we're seeing this like run up in demand leading up to what's going to be a crazy year in terms of like the different products that they're releasing to celebrate that anniversary. So when I think, and I know you guys are very familiar with the U.S. Mint, but when I think about what's happening next year with the 30th anniversary of Pokemon, the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the 40th anniversary of the Silver Eagle, the Gold Eagle, like I don't think we're going to get any sleep at CCG because it is just going to be a great year for collecting. And I'm seeing besides Pokemon cards, the U.S. Mint schedule is getting better and better this year. I think the U.S. Mint's coming out with some really interesting products. Next year will be better. Paper money very closely related to coins, so that market seems to be a little bit better. The only market that's a little soft right now is the comic book market. I think it's just those movies haven't been they haven't been having the box offices that they used to have. So I'm hoping that changes in the future. But every category is doing well except for that one right now.
That's interesting. Do you think that it's probably not big enough to make a big impact, but the U.S. Mint's going to be doing comic book coins, so that'll be an interesting. Maybe I could see some telemarketers in their room like thinking about products. I can do a comic book with a coin, and we'll do a
Yeah.
little two item product and stuff. So that hopefully that will grow. Be some business from that going on.
I just think in terms of the innovation for the Mint, the coming out with a DC licensed coin, to my knowledge, that's the first time the US Mint has ever done that kind of partnership with a private company. I think at least they're trying to do new things to bring new collectors in. And I think what's cool for our company is you could pair a DC coin with a DC comic with a DC trading card. And I think there is some opportunity for crossover. So I like at least that the US Mint is, they've always been very traditional. They're kind of thinking outside the box right now.
I mean, is it too obvious to ask you that why the U.S. Mint hasn't considered maybe going with Pokemon versus, let's say, DC? Is that an impossibility given, I don't know, the issues of IP, or what are we talking about there?
I really wouldn't know. I think if the US Mint is willing to do it with DC, I would imagine they're willing to do it with other companies. And hopefully, these coins are a success and then they will start to do it with others. You see Pokemon everything Pokemon, stuffed animals, Pokemon, photographs, Pokemon art, Pokemon jewelry, like Pokemon everything. So I think having Pokemon coins, it
Is
feels like it should be a possibility.
pardon my ignorance, but is that a Japanese brand or Pokemon?
Japanese brand. Yep.
Yeah, so that's the only thing that they're probably stand in the way is the government things they doing license deals with foreign country they're a lot of the congressional oversight and stuff they probably might get pushback on that. They say the all American Superman, that's a good place to start. So that'll
Yeah. Fair.
especially
You know,
today.
and I would love to see NFL or other sports, maybe NBA, anything like you said that's in the crossover, Max, and hopefully they'll do something in that regard. That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they did NBA coins, but they did it unfortunately like in April 2020. So the world is shut down. Then they release NBA coins. So like not the best time to release that.
Right.
But as you may recall, like the Baseball Hall of Fame coins, some of the most popular coins that the US Mint's ever come out with in the last maybe 10 plus years. And what we do at NGC, which I think is really cool, we go out and try and create like, custom holders, specialty labels to try to make the products a little bit more interesting when they're in our holders. So in that program, we actually licensed the rights from the National Baseball Hall of Fame, and we had like labels with their logo on it. We had different, baseball players from the Hall of Fame signing labels. So it's super cool. It kind of creates like an elevated, package for the coin.
Well, that's good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One thing, you were talking about all these different products and things you're involved in. You mentioned you got a person expert to do the signatures expertise. How do you manage that? Like finding, because everything you do requires talent. I mean, it's like, you don't have computers doing all this stuff, so you have to manage this talent. And I know that, in 1986, I graded coins for a while, and it was fun, but then all of a sudden I didn't enjoy doing it. And I assume that you have to actually find people who don't mind sitting in a dark room all day. And tell me about that a little bit about maintaining talent and finding talent and keeping it and stuff like that.
I think the hardest part of the job is finding talent and developing talent. Like I think anything else we can figure out, but to start a new grading category, like if we're going into, Pokemon cards or sports cards, it all starts with the expert. That's the first thing, like literally the first thing that we have to do is find a world-class expert. And so first it's hard to figure out who is a world-class expert just versus somebody who just does it. So you have to really vet these people. You have to make sure that they're trustworthy, and then you have to build a team around them. And look, you can train people, and we have a really good farm system for training people to do modern collectibles. Like once you have that expert, you could take somebody who has a passion and you could show them how to, do the uncirculated grades, for example. But to find somebody who really knows the full scope of world coins or ancient coins or vintage US coins, that is really, really difficult. And, when we find those people, we end up having to pay up for those people because like we want to make sure that they're motivated. And I think it does take a special kind of person who wants to sit there and do it all day. But the people we have, they're so passionate that, I mean, what's crazy is they do it all day and then they go on eBay at home and they start buying stuff for their personal collection. This is their life, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, I mean, I know you've
What's
got some people that have worked you guys for like 30 years, so there are people
Yeah.
that don't mind doing that every day, and that amazes me that people you get that kind of longevity. But for people watching this, that may be like say, hey, I'm an expert in something, or I think I'm saying, explain how if they wanted to get a job at NGC and start at the rookie level and what to expect. Can you talk about that just a little bit more in detail? Like like give somebody like, hey, this is maybe a good recruiting opportunity for you.
Yeah, for sure. Look, we always post openings on our website and we accept resumes from people, even if we don't have an opening. Because, look, for a vintage grader in any one of the categories, we're always looking, even if we don't have an opening. If you find the right person, we're going to pounce on that person. So people can submit their resume. The typical path, I would say, there's really two paths. If you're very, sort of new to collecting, you'd probably start as a verifier. That's the person who describes the collectibles. And so we're going to start you on the newer collectibles that are easy to describe. And you start to get exposed to a lot of different collectibles and you start to know what the types are and you know what to look for. And then from there, we can train you how to grade modern collectibles and then so on and so forth. The second path would be somebody who's much more experienced, who's been a dealer. And if we could pluck somebody out of dealing who's been used to buying raw collectibles over the counter in a coin shop, those people already come in because, their livelihood has been on the line every day buying collectibles. Those people already have a leg up in terms of authentication, at least. And so those are sort of the two paths for somebody to ultimately become a grader. But yeah, it's a really interesting and really challenging process for us.
Yeah, so
what's the hardest category to source grading talent?
If I had to pick one that at least would be the most important, I would say world coins, world vintage coins, and ancient coins. Like it is really, really difficult to find people there. With Pokemon cards and sports cards, one of the nice things is that those markets are so large and there are so many people who are interested in it. You can find, younger people who want to be graders and want to use that as kind of like, sometimes we say it's like their business school. They come here and they grade for us for 4 years, 5 years, and then they could go out in the market and they could use all that knowledge to benefit their business. But yeah, if there was one position I could fill today, it would be a vintage world grader. But the level of expertise to know all these different countries and all these different eras, like it is just it's an unusual find. It's a unicorn.
do you find sometimes so? Just I'm just thinking out loud about it. Could you find like someone who's really good at could work for you that's really good at attributing them, but he could never grade. because I think a U.S. grader could actually grade a world coin. I mean, grading's grading, but I
Yeah.
would think the real hard part is having someone sit there and, figure out, what the coin is and what country it's from and what those letters mean, all that kind of stuff. So, maybe, two people doing accomplishing the same thing, but different skills and putting them together.
I think you're right, but the biggest challenge is the authentication piece.
Yeah.
There are so many challenging Chinese vintage coins, Russian vintage coins, Middle Eastern vintage coins. If we could find somebody who knew how to authenticate it, and look, we have a really good team that exists today, but one of the complaints that I hear most frequently is why are vintage coins so slow at NGC? And that's really because we're never going to sacrifice the quality. So we have this, this team that basically like everything has to pass through, and they're doing a really good job. Very few coins ever come back to us with any errors. But what I wouldn't want to do is put somebody in that position that doesn't know what they're doing just to increase throughput, just to improve turnaround times. And then, long term, that never works.
Right.
Well, we've talked a lot about AI on our podcast and on other podcasts. Is authentication maybe a good place for AI in this manner? For example, and I don't know a ton about AI as my viewers know, but what I'm thinking is if you had 100 pictures of, let's say, a certain vintage Chinese coin, and the AI understood its exact proportions and how the letters should be shaped, whether there's dye marks from spark erosion counterfeiting or things like that. Can the AI be helpful in that regard? Can the AI help you first base coins and paper money that are received with foreign lettering and things that aren't immediately recognizable, and then say, I think with 99.8% legitimacy, this is a genuine coin based, because usually the Chinese counterfeits of American coins that we see so often on eBay and Etsy and things like that. These are coins that look counterfeit to every American coin dealer. So I would think an AI could look at that too and say, look, that's just the wrong way for the letter 9, or an R in Liberty is misshapen. Any thoughts there?
I would think this, AI is constantly improving. I would think at some point there's going to be a use case that makes sense for AI, whether it's identification, I know AI can do. Authentication, I think there's a possibility that it could do it if there's enough data. Now, look, assembling that data set, 100 images of the exact same Chinese coin, may be really challenging in certain key categories, because the coins that are being faked in the most valuable coins, you may only see them once a decade, for example, or you may never have seen that coin before. So I definitely think there's a possibility AI could, supercharge the grading process. I honestly don't see a scenario where like the human expertise of like a vintage coin grader ever gets replaced by AI.
Yeah, I
Like I
agree.
think those guys have tremendous job security, and we've spent a lot of money researching and testing AI, and it just right now can't do it as well as a human, even from a grading perspective, like analyzing strike and surface and luster and eye appeal. It just didn't give us the results that we
Well,
wanted.
what about the silver eagles, for example? We all let's say current year silver eagles shouldn't have toning, shouldn't have these are things that are just simply manufactured like screws off an assembly line, and can we use AI for grading very very recently produced items like that?
I would think that's possible, but um, basically, just inside baseball on grading, like we get those coins in very specific times of year. So we may have silver eagles that for 2 weeks in January, and then you're not going to get much more silver eagles until, let's say, the W mint marked ones come out later in the year. So the way we kind of looked at it is like, yes, maybe we could have AI do 69 versus 70 for some of these brand new silver eagles, but is it worth building out like an AI automation line for something that we may use 6 to 8 weeks out of the year? And I think, AI will keep getting cheaper. When we looked at it, it was, 4 years ago. It would have been really expensive from a capital investment, perspective to build out this AI automation for coins that, will grade a few 100,000 of over the course of a year, but concentrated in a few different periods. But I think you're right. Like it'll keep getting better, and I think there'll keep being use cases for it.
Right. Yeah. And plus also with silver eagles, the spotting is like one of the big things. So it's not just contact marks, and you can look at this. It's there's a lot of there's variables even with modern coins at 69 versus 70 that it's hard to take into account. Like just a little milk spot or whatever. So it's and then you can look at a coin one day and then like 2 days later it could look different.
Yeah, and knowing where a mark would be acceptable for 69 and where it wouldn't be acceptable. So same size mark, but depending on whether it's in the field or whether it's hidden by the design, same thing with spots. Like there's a lot of things that people have to consider that the human brain is really good at sort of factoring all together. That AI, like what we found when we were testing it, is it gave a lot of weight. It overweighted marks. And so just think every coin was terrible that came in because it had a mark.
Yeah. Speaking of, I was thinking about modern coins, was talking about it, and I think about this myself because other people ask me about sending coins in and doing things, and you guys kind of see a handle on it. I mean, the modern coin business is, I mean, it's got to be a big part of NGC's business. I mean, because you have vintage graders, but I mean, after 40 years, I mean, so many coins have already been graded and doing it. Can you like tell people a little bit about like, what is, because when I walk down, I come down and I see NGC, walk around, I was like, yeah, rooms full of coins like everywhere, but it's mostly modern. And I know, can you give like a sense of the scope of like the modern versus the vintage business?
Yeah, modern is by far the biggest in terms of both volume and revenue. And there's both modern US coins, there's modern world coins. And I think what's exciting about modern is that there's really a design or a theme that could appeal to anybody or a country that could appeal to anybody. Like talk about accessibility, like grading makes things more accessible. I think modern coins and all the diversity of those modern coins, that just makes coin collecting more accessible. And so you get new people into the market. Some portion of those people are going to only collect modern. Some of them are going to end up gravitating towards vintage coins, whether it's vintage US or vintage world coins. So I think it's great to see this proliferation of modern coin collecting. And then what's interesting on the vintage side is you're totally right. A lot of the US vintage coins from the 18th century, the 19th century, they've already been graded, especially if they have a certain value. But what's interesting is that, yesterday's modern coins are today's vintage coins. So like the vintage US team, they're grading Walkers and Franklins and Washington, silver Washington quarters. So like the vintage market has changed for us, but it's still a sizable portion of the business. And then with vintage world, there's just still so much opportunity out there. There's still so much that's never been graded.
Max, it's funny. I have a coin on my desk. You talk about that. I have a 1839 a token from Great Britain, and it's like a dealer token. And on the back of it, it's 1839. On the back of it, he said he's a dealer in ancient and modern coins. So I think that's pretty cool. So it's like,
Yeah, sure.
his Una the Lion coin was a modern coin when it came out. So it was,
Yeah.
it's pretty funny. So it's, well, speaking about the modern a little bit, how's the 10-point scale doing for you guys? Are you guys seeing any crossover, or is that sticking at all, or what do you think?
Yeah, for sure. So that we call that NGCX. So
Okay.
basically in comics, in cards, in most other collectibles besides coins and paper money, items are graded on a 10-point scale. And so what we were finding is that a lot of our customers in cards or comics wanted to get into coins, but they had a really difficult time understanding the 70-point scale. And what we were able to do is equate that 70-point scale to a 10-point scale, put NGCX as the brand on the label, and now we're able to start selling that to a lot of different new collectors. And we're seeing a pretty significant growth in that. We just released a population report for NGCX, which I think is going to bring more transparency to that market and drive more submissions to it. But yeah, I think what's important to know there is we're not trying to replace the Sheldon scale. We're always going to have the Sheldon scale. This is really a program for people who are not familiar with the Sheldon scale, never would understand the Sheldon scale, otherwise would never buy a coin. This is one way to get new people buying coins. And I think anything that gets more people buying coins really is good for everybody in the coin business.
Yeah, I think I saw when I was in Europe at Berlin, a few of the couple of the big marketers over there. They seem to like that idea. That have you also heard some of the same thing to some of the European interest?
Yeah, for sure. And in China too, we're seeing a lot of interest in that 10-point scale. Like it just really resonates. I think with those DC coins, that are coming out this summer, you're going to see a lot of those get graded NGCX with a 10-point scale as they try to sell them to the comic collectors and the card collectors familiar with that 10-point scale.
Yeah.
Do you envision sort of packaging with both in there, like cards and a coin in the same kind of a slab? I mean, that's where it would really make sense, right? Who wants to see something graded NGC 70 with a card graded CCG 10?
I
Kind
think
of
that'd be
aspect.
super cool. I mean, if you remember, the US Mint used to do coin and currency sets not all the time, but fairly frequently, and they haven't done one in a
Hmm.
while. So yeah, I could see a coin and currency set. I could see a coin and card set, a coin and comic set. I could see multiple of them. And obviously, I think, CCG is in the best place to be able to do that kind of like multi collectible packaging. So I think we'll see that with the DC coins, but I hope to see more of that in the future because I think it just, once somebody's a collector, it's hard for them to just collect one area. They end up branching out into all these different sort of affiliated areas. I mean, I know I find that for myself.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about it. I've never even brought this up as a subject to ask anybody, but I was thinking about the U.S. Mint's coming out with like a DC coin, and they've got the Privy coin coming out on Friday and stuff. Is the BEP ever anybody ever approached them about being creative about making anything that would be for specifically for collectors? It would be kind of fun because I know you guys kind of dominate currency grading, and that would sure benefit you guys. And I would think that that's something that's had to cross your mind. I've never even thought about it.
I would love to see that. I think changing US currency is just such a tall order. But I mean, you look at the currency and so just in paper money, just for example, the vast majority of our business is non US paper money. It comes from overseas. There's so many different innovative designs that are coming out. Other countries have more flexibility with their paper money. I mean, the US, we all see what the paper money looks like. Like, there's not a big modern opportunity there, but at some point there could be.
I
Yeah, I
mean,
mean, I
I
can.
would love to see Jeff Garrett on the $5 bill.
Yeah, there
That
you
would be
go.
my vote for sure. At least just a limited series, be
Yeah, yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, we'll have to explain to the BEP how like a privy market just be like having a something cool on that you could not change the design but make it so it's a limited collectible. So
Two
Yeah,
stars.
instead of
Just
a
put a
Sparno,
second
put an
star.
eagle on it.
yeah,
Right.
we got to work
Anything.
on that. You mentioned that about the the China and all the markets. You know, a couple of 3 weeks ago, it seemed like it's old news now, but it's still relevant. Is what's how are you guys responding to the tariff issues, and is it affecting you guys? I guess I was talking to. Charles Anderson a couple of days ago, who John bought Whitman from, and he was telling us about the nightmare he's having with fireworks. I mean, it was like literally like he had boats on the water, and if they were on the water, there was no tariff. But if they had left port, and then they're having to put things in warehouses to avoid it, and it's I guess for big players, like you guys, it's got to have a big impact.
Yeah, what I would say, fortunately, we saw it coming, at the end of last year. Like, you knew that tariffs were coming. And so we took steps to de risk our business as much as we possibly could. Obviously, nobody knew exactly what tariffs would look like. But what I can tell you is that most of our holders at this point are made in the United States. So those are totally immune from tariffs. We have seen some cost pressures there, like the price has gone up for those holders. But fortunately, like, we're not having to deal with the tariff complication. I do think for our customers, though, when the tariffs first sort of went live at the beginning of April, there was so much panic about shipping their collectibles from Europe or Asia to the United States. But one of the cool things that we do is, we have offices London, Munich, Hong Kong. We're about to open an office in Dubai on Tuesday, actually.
That's
We have an
cool.
office in Shanghai. So what these offices do, they make it really easy for somebody overseas to submit to the US. We do everything. We're able to ship it in a way that avoids tariffs. It's called the temporary import bond. So it's complicated. A regular collector couldn't do a TIB, but we're able to do that. We have customs brokers, we have lawyers, and so we've made it where it's still pretty seamless to send collectibles into us for grading. But yeah, for about 2 weeks at the beginning of April, it was a fire drill.
Yeah, I bet.
Interesting. Interesting. That's it. That's incredible. That's an incredible benefit to working with CCG that you guys have this kind of import thing taken care of. I like that. I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, when I
Yeah,
buy
it's,
coins when I buy coins, I go to the Berlin show and I try to buy ancient coins, and I really it mystifies me about the whole
Hmm.
process. So what I do is I take them to your guys' table and they handle it for me, and they show up in Sarasota, 3 weeks later, and I don't have to do all that stuff. So it is really a great benefit that you guys have the experts that sort all that out because it is complicated.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one of the areas where we're going to see the most growth going forward is like, the US, I think we have good coverage. I think there's, the collectibles markets are still growing in the US, but internationally, just again, making things more accessible, making our services more accessible. That's why we're opening up that office in Dubai. So we'll be the first grading service in the Middle East. And I think there's still so many other areas where we could expand into to sort of unlock that grading opportunity.
Yeah, when I go to the Berlin show, which is probably that's the only international show I really attend regularly. I don't go to the Asian shows because I don't deal much in that business. But I've been going for I guess 7 or 8 years or so, and every year there are more, NGC certified coins in dealers' cases. I see it growing, and I know there has been resistance, and I know like some of the ancient guys still don't like it, but do you guys like try to educate them, or you just think the market speaks for itself and the people go in that direction, or how do you guys grow your European business or I guess the world business?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is prices realized. And I think the prices realized for NGC certified coins, they speak for themselves. So people could be resistant. And I would say in any new market, just about any new market, at first people are resistant to grading. Initially the dealers have all the power. They're the ones who could say what the item is, what the condition of it is, you know, and they are scared, I think in some cases, of a third party company coming in and saying, no, wait a minute, that's not what it is. Like, here's actually what it is. And so there is that natural skepticism. There's some fear. And then I think when they see, wait a minute, by giving people that transparency, that confidence, it actually sells for more money. Then all of a sudden you have these people, like, they may not like it, but if they're making more money from it, they start to use it. And then what I would say is, I first went to the Berlin show, I think probably 2011, so maybe 14 years ago at this point. And I don't think it was just resistance. Like, it was outright, like, I think they despised grading. Like, it was palpable. Like, you could tell that they did not like grading.
All right.
And then I'd say, like, 4 or 5 years later, you start to see people saying, okay, well, I've got this collection that I want to have a global audience for. Let me try grading for that. And now I would say, look, and this has probably been the case for the last 5 years, people just say, I just want it all graded. Like, just grade everything. So that European market, it was slow going for us. Like, we lost money for a lot of years. And now it's a huge, huge opportunity for us, both in coins and banknotes. And now what we're trying to do is expand, our card grading into Europe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I can back that up completely, Max. I've been going to the Berlin show even longer, and it's just been amazing how slow the European market has been to accept third party grading. They just they're just like in 1986 at U.S. coins, the typical U.S. coin dealers first reaction was, I don't want anyone else telling me how to grade my coins. So it's a generational issue. You're now waiting for the 80, 90-year-old European coin dealers to sort of hand off to their younger generation. Whenever there is a younger generation, whether it's in the Monaco auction companies or Spain, Geneva, you really start seeing lots of NGC graded coins, no question about it. Third party grading, as you say, follow the money. People, all these European dealers resisted, and then they slowly started seeing, I don't know, Heritage or Stax Bowers coming along, buying coins over there, bringing them to the United States, getting them graded, and selling them back over there,
Yeah.
or into the Middle East or into Asia. So third party grading is definitely here to stay. And I just want to add before we get into more things, but I just want the thing that strikes me as we're talking, Max, is that it's just so dynamic what you guys are working on. I love, we do that here at Whitman. That what we've really brought at Whitman when we merged with Gray Sheet is just all these new ideas, and I'm just kind of making everybody uncomfortable every day. Oh, by the way, I want to do this. I want to do 14 more books than we did last year, and I want to do this. I want to bring it online and automate such and such. And we're doing podcasts now, which is something new for our media industry. And I just love hearing whether things, not everything's going to work. You just throw a lot of things at a wall, but that you'll try everything. And I love the idea that you'll try everything and try to get people to cross over. It's another debate how successful we want to be at getting coin collectors to cross over into the mass market. I actually don't love the idea in a certain way, but from your business perspective, of course, you want these numbers. So I applaud that. I just want to interject that before we continue.
Yeah, I think what's key is that you got to stay true to your roots. So we've got to always focus on the quality of our authentication and grading. But beyond that, we can innovate. So we'll never innovate in a way that we think will sacrifice the key core services that we're doing. But other than that, special label, special holder, crossover selling, different locations, all of that I think is fair game for experimentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We mentioned this a little bit earlier, but next year, 2026 is going to be a big year. I think it's going to be for Whitman. I think for all coin people. I mean, you've got the 40th anniversary of the Silver and Gold Eagles, and then the 200th anniversary of the country. And I think we're just now like seeing just like a whiff of what that's going to be as far as celebrations. Even Charles Anderson, we were talking about his his fireworks business. He's like, think of what that's going to be for that one business, what it'll be for him
Yeah.
next year, doing. So I assume you guys kind of like, kind of keep a close eye and see what's going on, what the U.S. Mint's doing. Can you give like, I know there's going to be like a special, like a Liberty Bell coin and a few other things. What do you know that the Mint's doing that's exciting, and little like teasers about which, maybe some people don't know that's watching this.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, the Liberty Bell coin, which is going to be the first non-round coin made by the United States. So the U.S. Mint, like we talked about, very traditional. They sort of stay true to what they've always done. Now there's going to be a coin in the shape of a Liberty Bell, and I think there's going to be a silver metal version and a gold coin version. I think that's going to be super interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of excitement there. But what I think is the most important thing is that there's going to be coins that should be released into circulation, from what I understand, dual dated, like we saw in the bicentennial. So 1776 to 2026, I think they're going to do the cent through the quarter. And I think that's going to bring a lot more people into coin collecting. There's going to be people looking in their change for this unique 1 year issue. And it really could be a watershed moment for the coin business.
Yeah. And also the end of the penny there may not be any 2026 pennies, so that'll be interesting to see. It's actually on my agenda. I want to write an article about the the impact of that, because the big changes in the penny have been fundamental with coin collecting since even 1857, when they stopped making large pennies. That's when that created the modern coin business, essentially the modern coin collecting. I mean, and we'll see. I was looking on Facebook earlier today, and like someone said that someone's selling 2025 pennies for $10 a roll. So there's already like this demand for them. People are like supposed demand. So it'll be interesting to see how, there's a lot of things rolling into 2026 that, companies like you and Whitman and other people will hopefully be able to leverage into growing the hobby, in a big way.
Absolutely. Anything that gets people looking at their pocket change, I think is a great thing for the coin, market, the coin, hobby. So yeah, I think the end of the penny, like you said, the end of the large cent was what really sparked numismatics in this country. So I think this could be just it just could be a revolutionary moment for coins.
That'd be good. The one that's a little bit of a negative that's kind of crazy is a crazy price of bullion. And the price points. Are you seeing changes in submissions based on the bullion prices like jacking up so much?
Well, yeah, look, what I tell you is we basically don't get generic gold for grading anymore. I mean, in fact, some stuff gold that I wouldn't even consider to be generic, it just doesn't make sense to pay for grading when if you just hold it next week, it's worth $100 more. Like gold has been up and to the right seemingly for what, the last year. And like, we're not, so yeah, our gold business is definitely down. I think with silver, the high price of spot, has also limited dealers' ability to go out and buy huge quantities. And then I think on top of that, just the only complaint I'd have about the U.S. Mint right now is they then charge such a high premium
Yeah.
above what's already a high spot price. Where like, look, $36 for an ounce of silver, like that's pretty high. But then to sell a 1 ounce proof silver eagle for $95, I mean, it just makes it unaffordable and unattainable to so many collectors.
Yeah. And then you put on grading fees, and then, marketing costs and things like that. All of a sudden it's a $200 coin. So it really, really makes them expensive.
Yeah, for sure. And other world mints are able to sell them cheaper. So I believe the US Mint, I mean, look, the US Mint needs to make a profit. They can still be profitable without charging 3 times spot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. Um, One thing, I guess, it's funny you talked about earlier, like you actually, had as a collector, what do you collect? What is your interest in coins? And I know it's also interesting because I do a lot of business with your brother, Sam. I guess I know
Yeah.
I don't know if he collected ancients or just decided he wanted to learn them one day, but tell us about your history with coins and A even.
Yeah, so I went to my first coin show, I think, in 1996. That was, I think, the New York International at that time. I think I joined the ANA the year after that. So 1997, I became an ANA member. And look, I started like most kids collecting like pocket change and saving Washington quarters and like those state quarter boards when those came out. But I gravitated, I love American history. So I gravitated, I always used to say I collect colonial coins and medals. But what I can tell you is like in my position at CCG, you start to see so much other stuff that you then start to gravitate out from, colonial coins and medals to really just anything that kind of piques my interest. So like, as an example, I actually brought a couple of coins here. So like one of the colonial coins I bought recently, an elephant token. Obviously it's one of the key red book types. But what I liked about this coin is that it was part of the Eric Newman collection. I don't know if you could see that. So working on the Eric Newman collection when we graded that whole thing, that coin then had a special appeal to me. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Not only do I like the coin, but I remember dealing with the Eric P. Newman Numismatic Education Society at the time we were doing it. And so there's other things like that, like this is a dime from the SS Central America. So I don't really collect, dimes, but the SS Central America is an amazing story. I remember working on the grading of these items. So I was like, okay, I got to have something from the SS Central America in my collection. So you kind of just like branch out, from there. And so I'm just buying, I bought a comic book recently. I can't say I'm a comic collector. I definitely am not an expert in comics, but you see a lot of cool stuff and then you just get that itch where you have to own it.
Yeah, I think it's great that you're a collector. I think that helps your, all the job you do. I think it gives you a better, having a collector viewpoint on it. I have lunch occasionally with Steve Feigenbaum, and he famously doesn't collect, and he kind of laughs about that. But I think it's good that he's got you there that has that collector gene in you that understands that, because I think that's important.
It's a good balance for sure to be able to represent the collector and have the business perspective, but also know what a collector would want at the end of the day. And what I can tell you is, I do see some of the customer service feedback that we get. If I hear about a typo that we made on a label, I get just as pissed off as the collector who's complaining about that, because I just think, like, if I got my coin back, and I do submit to NGC. I submitted earlier this year a couple medals that I had bought. If I got something back with a typo, like, I would be upset. So it helps to ensure that I'm like so deep in the weeds, making sure that the quality is as good as it possibly can be.
That's great. That passion is really what it's all about for all of us collectors, and then the people, we deal and we collect and we're part of this whole economy. But what I seized on what you were saying there is the coins with stories aspect. It's one thing to collect a series of Buffalo nickels or barber quarters and things like that, but items with stories now, and maybe as they relate into other collectibles, is really what it's all about. Whenever I get a question about what was the most expensive coin I ever sold, that's the most common question at a cocktail party. Well, I sold this 1894 S dime for $2 million, but why is it? Oh my God, why is it worth $2 million? And then I just basically sum it up by saying it's the story, right? It's the Mona Lisa of its kind, and it has a wonderful story, and when I tell the story, it's even better. And that's, really quick, I'm noticing behind you, one of my favorite numismatic book, which Whitman did not publish, is behind you. It's called Illegal Tender by David Tripp. And it's also the book that I tell everyone I talk to who has a genuine interest in this hobby is read this book about the 1933 $20 gold piece, how its rarity came to be, and why it's uniquely worth $20 million or more today. So I agree that the stories are everything to our viewers, to our readers, and everybody has a nostalgic kind of connection to this hobby. And if you don't, then I'm not sure why you would be a collector, right? If there's no nostalgia for you, then I don't know. But I want to add one more statistic. Patrick sent me a link. Patrick Perez, our editor, sent me a link this morning about Deloitte and Touche, or I guess just Deloitte these days, came out with a report about eBay State of Collectibles 2025. Now, interestingly, this is the Australian edition. So this is in Australia. They publish, and in Australia, they now estimate that 1 in 3 adults are collectors of some sort. This is an amazing statistic. I'll send it to you guys afterwards. I'll post it on the video. But this is an amazing statistic. And out of those, I think they say something to the effect of 1 in 5 of those collectors. So now, 1 in 3, divide that to 1 in 5, have bought and sold those collectibles in the last year. So now everybody's becoming kind of a dealer in this economy. It's the influencer economy, it's the dealer economy. We're all just kind of wheeling and dealing, and CCG is very well situated from my perspective at the fulcrum of a lot of that. So kudos to you guys for being there. I think that's just been fantastic.
And I think it's interesting how we are in coins are like, it's all about condition. And it's so funny how that is really the same instinct across all those fields. Like, a comic book in 5 and a comic book in 10 is like 2 different animals. And it's like, it's interesting that no matter what you collect, the drive for quality is there, and you guys have that job of discerning that. So that's I'm glad that you really help facilitate that desire for the high quality and also the story. So it's to me that's really fascinating.
Yeah, and my theory on collectibles in general is that as we get more digitized and people are spending more time on social media and on the internet, just generally their computers, I think there is even more nostalgia for these physical items. Like people are like, there's some comfort, there's some value to holding something physical that otherwise you may not have ever held. And so I think, that's partly why we're seeing more and more people get into collectibles and more things are becoming collectibles. So like we're now certifying VHS tapes. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, could a VHS tape ever be collectible? I would say it's impossible. Like that, it's not only is it too new, but it's just it's media. It's not a collectible. But now look, like a Back to the Future sold for $78,000. Like
Come
there's
on.
there's so much opportunity for anything to become collectible if, like you said, John, if people are nostalgic about it.
Yeah,
Right.
I
And we're
can't.
very nostalgic about things like that, like back to my generation, of course, right? Yeah. And then you don't see VHS tapes anymore. You know what would be really rare, Max, is remember there were CDs, but then for videos, it was like, what did they call that huge platter? It was like the size of a large record that held a whole movie, but they were very short lived. You know,
There's a
disc
That's
player,
before my time.
yeah, they exist. They exist. You guys got to get the slab in those. I think that's been great. It's been really great to chat with you today, and I mean, this has just been fantastic. A breath of fresh air. Glad you guys are creatively thinking about all these new things. It's helpful to a company like Whitman. We also, as Jeff said, just we're trying to be supportive of the collectible hobby, and we're a little bit of a dinosaur in that regard. In numismatics, I don't even know if anybody else is actively sort of publishing books and reference works and things like that, which is still important. Everything's online in this world, but good information is more real in print, and it certainly matters. So, in a tactile world like these collectibles we're talking about, it makes sense.
I think you're right. I mean, that's why I'm surrounded by coin books. Like, I think anyone who's a serious coin collector still relies a lot on books. And there's some books, like, there's some information even to this day that you can really only find from books. So, I'm constantly buying coin books. I'm reading about coins. I just got this actually in the mail. Like, you'll appreciate this, John and
Oh,
Jeff. So, the new 100 Greatest edition. So, by Jeff. And I saw, John, your 94S dime story was in the front of the
Oh,
book. So,
that's right. That's right. So I
yeah,
tell the story
yeah.
there. Buy
Yeah,
the
so
book.
like
Don't make me repeat it.
yeah, there you
yeah,
go.
so again, like you said, stories are driving people's interest. They're driving sales of these coins, and so I think what you're doing with Whitman and all the Jeff writes a lot of articles for our website. Like it brings in more people, and there's just that one moment where they see something that interests them, and then that's the hook to becoming a collector.
Thanks again for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And everybody who's watching, please put comments below in the YouTube channel, and we'll answer those questions as fast as we can. And we look forward to hearing from you. And subscribe to the channel so you can support this podcast, and we can get more wonderful people like Max online. So thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Max. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.